So in this video, we're going to continue solving nonlinear systems using the elimination method this time instead of substitution. So notice that I do have, in fact, nonlinear. I have two nonlinear equations, right? I have, as long as I have anything being squared, we know that it's nonlinear. These happen to be, I believe they're two ellipses. We'll get to that in another chapter. So when you have an ellipse, it can either cross none. It can cross one time, 2 times, 3 times, or 4 times. So, and you can play around with that, drawing, some ellipses and see how many times you can get them to cross. But so anyway, so what we're going to do is I'm going to use elimination here, because if I have two x squareds or two y squareds, as long as I can, just like before, as long as I can get that same coefficient out front, but the opposite sign, one has to be positive, one has to be negative, then I can eliminate them. So I'm going to focus on the y's, because remember, it has to be, actually let me write that down. It has to be the same, the coefficient has to be the same number, but it also has to be the opposite sign. That's the only way for the to get them to eliminate, right? So I'm going to focus on the y's, because I already have one positive and one negative. Here I'd have to mess with the sign. So I always like to stick, if I have a positive and negative, I like to stick with those. So all I need to do, if you see this, all I need to do is multiply the second equation by a 3, right? If I can get a 3 here, then that all the y's will cancel. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to put that in parentheses, and I'm going to multiply by positive, actually I'll do it on the back side, doesn't matter, positive 3, and distribute that. So my first equation is not going to change. My second equation becomes 6x squared minus 3y squared equals 18. Now when I go to add them straight down, right, if I add them straight down, I end up with 7x squared. These guys go away, right, because that becomes 0y squared equals 28. So x squared equals 4. So x equals positive or negative 2. Remember, I'm taking the square root of both sides, so you make sure you get that positive and negative, okay? So now that is my x values, and now I have to plug it back in to get my y values. So I can only solve for one y value at a time, so I'm gonna first start with positive 2, right? I have a positive 2 down here, and then I'll have to go again and do the negative 2. So let's just do the positive 2 first. And I get, so if I do positive 2, I get 2 squared plus 3y squared equals 10. So that's 4, right? This all becomes 4, and I can minus it over. So can you see that I get 3y squared equals 6, so y squared equals 2, so y equals positive and negative square root of 2. Remember, I took the square root. Please, 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 you cannot forget, when you are the one square rooting both sides of the equation, you have to do a positive and negative. So can you see, just by plugging in positive 2, remember all I did was plug in positive 2, I have 2 answers so far. So my 2 answers are going to be 2 comma square root of 2 and 2 comma negative square roots of 2. So right now I have 2 answers. So if I go through and do this for negative 2, so remember we did the positive 2 down here for the x value, and now I have to do negative 2. So when I plug negative 2 in here, actually most of you could probably see, if I plug in, actually let me write that out, if I do negative 2 squared plus 3y squared equals 10, well, isn't the negative of us being squared still positive? So this is actually not going to change, so I am going to end up with y equals positive and negative square root of 2. If you don't believe me, go ahead and solve all this out. Make sure when you have a negative number, when you have a negative value for x, that you put it in parentheses. It'll help to remind you to, especially when you're squaring. So again, I have another 2 answers. So my other 2 answers are going to be negative 2 comma square roots of 2 and negative 2 comma negative square roots of 2. So I have a total of 4 answers so far. You see that? I've got 2 right here and 2 right here. So what I have to do, like I said in the last video, you must test every single solution in nonlinear systems, because some of these could end up being extraneous solutions. So I am going to take this x and y value, and I'm going to plug it into the first equation, and I'm going to plug it into the second equation. And if it works, great. Then I'm going to take the next solution and plug it into the first and the second. You have to check it in both. And I'm going to take this one and plug it into both, and the last one and plug it into both. So I already did that for you, and actually they do all end up working out. So these are all solutions. So this one does have 4 solutions.